Hey guys, welcome to Bold Assumptions, Bold Theory number 2. This week we'll be focusing on hydrogen fuel cells, most specifically hydrogen fuel cells in cars. One of the first questions probably asked is, what are they? Hydrogen fuel cells focus more on the electric side of transportation. They basically work as a battery which turns an electric motor which can then turn the wheels of a car. So it doesn't work the same way as a normal car would with a combustion engine, which then turns wheels and motors and all that. It cuts out the middleman and just straight up turns motors, which turn the wheels. Where they differ from most electric vehicles on the road is how they get their electricity. Usually electric vehicles on the road, they have a battery which gets electricity from elsewhere, possibly, charging up at a power station, solar panels, wind, all types of different energy. What hydrogen fuel cells do is they use a different concept where hydrogen and oxygen react in a battery, which we'll touch on later. An important distinction to set out first is that they do not use combustion, as they can sometimes be misinterpreted too. So unlike, say, a rocket, for example, which uses hydrogen as its fuel that's, works through combustion and shoots out the back, it doesn't work like that. It's more of a battery aspect of it rather than, combustion. And so the next question you probably have is, how do they work? So they're basically batteries, as we touched on earlier, and they work through the production of water. And they get a relatively constant supply of power because, the hydrogen's usually in the tank of the car, which then can be fed through and just constantly coming, which is as opposed to other electricity, which sometimes, fizzes out and kind of sputters. Basically, the way that the battery works is the positive terminal of the battery is made of platinum. The hydrogen can then react to this platinum and break down into protons, which are usually the hydrogen ion, and then electrons, which are distributed in a different area. These electrons are actually what the battery wants and uses for electricity, because the flow of electrons creates electricity. So basically, once the hydrogen ions are separated from the electrons, the protons, which are, in a sense, the hydrogen ions, they are able to pass through an electrolyte in the middle of the battery. This acts as a filter which prevents electrons from coming through and lets all the other stuff out. The battery itself does not want any of the protons. It uses that later on for another chemical reaction to take place, but the electrons are what it's focused on, and that's what they want to, keep going through the system. Once the protons, or hydrogen ions, for the sake of the video, I'll just keep calling them protons moving forward, but once they make it through this electrolyte layer, they're able to combine with oxygen, which is placed in the negative terminal of the battery, and that creates another chemical process which I'll later touch on. But once those make it through and, combine and react, the electrons are able to fall through to an outer circuit, which is then used to power the motors and turn the wheels. After these electrons are able to, turn the wheels and they've done their job, they keep going back through the system and come back around to where the oxygen is at the negative terminal, and now the protons are. Once they're here, hydrogen and oxygen, everyone knows it makes water. So they take the electron, they take the proton, and the hydrogen and the oxygen, they combine together to make water. This is the byproduct of the whole system. And what people love about this is it's very good for the environment, because rather than having all these crazy carbons coming out of the back of a car, you just have water vapors coming out. So that's why it's a really good positive for this. It's important to note that this whole process I just explained, it's not one giant battery doing all this. They're actually, the reason they call them hydrogen cells is they're actually miniature cells doing all the same job. So you have a bunch of different cells, as they call them, working together and creating series circuits which can then power the different generators, or not generators, turbines, and turn the wheels. So essentially, you have a whole system of these, hopefully, working together and creating electricity. So after hearing all of what seems like only positives coming out of this, you may wonder, why aren't these on the road yet? So, of course, the first thing to note is the fact that they're very inefficient. The first place where the inefficiency can be derived is in the gathering of hydrogen itself. So you need hydrogen in order to, create this reaction. And the thing is, hydrogen, though it's very, very predominant throughout our universe and our Earth, making up, I think, upwards of 70 to 80%, I might be wrong, but basically most of the Earth is hydrogen. There's a lot of hydrogen. It's the most common element. But the thing is, because it's so simple, it wants to combine with all these other things and make things. That's why we have so much water on Earth, because hydrogen and oxygen makes water. So you're not going to find a straight up hydrogen floating around Earth. Well, you can, but very rarely. And so basically what you have to do is break down water to make hydrogen again. And if you can already see where the problem arises, you're breaking down water just in order to make water again. So of course you're going to lose a lot of energy along the way. The most common method for breaking down water back into hydrogen and oxygen is electrolysis. This is basically the reverse idea of a battery. You're working in reverse, and rather than combining like the battery was, you're just doing the reverse effect. So you're switching the poles and doing it that way. So according to, I think it was Carbon Commentary, they say that most electrolysis can be estimated about 80% efficient max. So you're already losing 20% efficiency. Going forward, most people predict that the people who are in charge of hydrogen fuel cells, if in order to keep it sustainable and clean, they're probably going to power the electrolysis with solar panels, because otherwise it would defeat the purpose in using the hydrogen fuel cells in the first place. Now, very generous estimates put solar panels about 18% efficient. With this, the combination of the 80% efficiency of electrolysis and the 18% efficiency of solar panels, you're only going to get about 14.4% efficiency at the maximum after you utilize both these techniques. The 18% efficiency came from Pick My Solar, and they, I assume, have more generous estimates because they're trying to sell the product to people. So you can only see, how much lower the efficiency could potentially get. And that was only the numbers just for the harvesting of hydrogen. You still have to factor in the fact that after the hydrogen's been harvested, you have to have the efficiency of the cell to motor. California Hydrogen estimates this efficiency of cell to motor transfer to be about 40 to 60%. When you combine the 40 to 60% efficiency with the 14.4% harvest efficiency, you're getting a really small number at the highest amount, by the way, at 60% efficiency of about 8.64% efficient. This basically means from initial harvest all the way leading up through all the processes down to, the road, you're getting about 8.64% of the energy that you could have had. So a way to visualize this would be like, let's pretend you have this much energy from the sun, right? Then you have your solar panel, which is getting about this much energy from that. Then you have the electrolysis, which is getting about this much energy from that. And then it's only narrowing, it's getting smaller and smaller and smaller. So you start with this much and you just keep cutting away the percentages until you have so little that it almost seems like you're better off just using the solar panel to begin with, because the solar panel had about 18% efficiency, whereas the harvest leading all the way up to the hydrogen cells had about 8.64%. Now, a fair thing to mention is the fact that hydrogen cells themselves are very, very compact. That's where people are seeing more of the reason to use them, because in order to have the same amount of energy as the hydrogen cells, you would need a huge amount of surface area of solar panels. So obviously there are, positives to it, but it's very difficult at this point. So I want to keep in mind that, hydrogen cells, they're not all bad. Obviously, for storage reasons, it makes a lot more sense to have, this compact system of fuel cells in a battery in a car, rather than covering an entire huge car with solar panels and then getting, barely the same amount of efficiency. So I do see potentially a good future for it, but I don't really know how, the efficiency problems are going to be solved. Obviously, I know some companies are working, to make like nanotubes, which can get more sunlight from the solar panels and stuff like that. I don't really know where the future of fuel cells leads, but I do know that the solar panel market is very open and has high hopes. So if solar panels can be maximized to their highest potential, maybe that could help the fuel cell market too. In all, at their current state, hydrogen fuel cells are painfully convoluted and very inefficient. The idea is very cool and worth further research, but at their current state, I just don't see it worth it right now. If these inefficiencies can be worked out, obviously hydrogen fuel cells are going to take the clean energy world by storm. But until then, I just don't see it. Anyways, it's been Bold Assumptions, Bold Theory.